All right. Good evening, my EM aficionados. It is Saturday, August 23rd, and this is actually the second time I'm recording this video. I know I've done this with a few videos. So I actually recorded a version of this video yesterday, and well, there's actually no video here. This is an audio track, and I just put some images over it. But I recorded a video of this yesterday, and I've listened to it several times since then. And while I liked the material, I wasn't happy with the delivery. I felt like there was just a little too much, vitriol in it. And so I decided I needed to bring it down a notch here. Okay. So now that I've had a chance to kind of process that and kind of just, calm down a little bit, because I made the post on my YouTube community, right, that I had lost my voice, and that was kind of impeding me. So you can probably still hear I'm pretty good at this point. I'm probably like 90% back. Yesterday I was probably about 80%. I made a pretty good jump from Thursday to Friday. So from Monday to Thursday was terrible. I didn't have my voice for basically that entire time, and my throat hurt. So on top of that, I'm almost 3 weeks now out of my shoulder surgery. So I had a bunch of things kind of wrong with me at the time. The shoulder still being one of them. But that's going well as well. Things are progressing well. And, it's been 3 weeks already, so it's gone by pretty quick. So I'm hoping it won't be that long before I'm looking back at this and like, oh, that was just kind of a blip on the radar. But anyways, so the title of the video is Microscopy and Microanalysis 2025: The Good, the Bad, the Ugly. I thought about changing the title of the video, and I'm going to keep the title as it is. The title is a little edgy, but I decided that was still warranted, as we're going to talk about here. So, because one of the titles I was originally thinking about was M&M 2025 Constructive Criticism. And I didn't think that was just going to get the attention of people like the one I have now. Okay, so that's why I went with that. And again, I think it's warranted based on what I'm going to talk about here in a little bit. So, but many of you who are LinkedIn buddies with me, you saw the LinkedIn post I made, which I believe was while the conference was still going on. I think that was, I forget which day it was. I don't think it was it was a couple of days after I gave my talk, but I talked about everybody thanking you for supporting it and how great it was and how great the experience had been. And that's all true. I'm not taking any of that back. So again, the title is M&M 2025, The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. So I want to start by talking about the good, because that's really the most important part. That's not the controversial part, right? Or the edgy part, though, which is probably the part that people are more interested, or the parts that people are more interested in. But I do want to start with that, okay? I do want to start by talking about the good. And there was a tremendous amount of good, really great, right? Maybe I could title it, it doesn't sound as good though, because the good, the bad, the ugly has, context, right? So, but anyways, really the great. So the great was meeting people. So I got a chance to meet so many of you that follow me on YouTube, or you follow me on LinkedIn, and I got to meet you in person, got to talk with you about your work. You told me you were giving presentation or a poster, and you asked me to come watch or see your poster, and I did, right? And seeing the work that a lot of you are doing is very impressive. I'm very impressed by a lot of what you are doing. it's great to see this, right? And it's great that I've heard from so many of you too, that you're telling me that I've had a role in this, right? Like I have helped you. I've helped you with your microscopy skills. And that just means the world to me. You know, and that's very flattering and humbling to me that you tell me that, right? You think of me in that capacity. So that was without question the best part of the conference was that. You know, there were people who wanted to take pictures with me. Somebody asked me for an autograph, which was really flattering. That was the first time I had ever been asked to sign an autograph in my, 42 years of existence. So, that was just a great moment. And then aside from that, the actual material and content of the conference, right, was just top notch. I mean, it was frustrating. I found myself frustrated a lot of the time because I just couldn't be in like 5 places at once, right? There were just so many good presentations on so many interesting topics, right? And you'd have to look at this and go, well, there's like 3 things going on right now and I can only be one place. Like, what am I supposed to do? I mean, that's a good problem to have, right? Of course, because there really was never a moment where there wasn't something interesting going on, like a good talk happening. And then when there weren't talks happening, we had the poster sessions, and those were great too. There was no shortage of interesting material and interesting stuff. One of the things too and plenary talks as well. I saw both of the plenary talks. I'm obviously not like a biological or life sciences guy, but I watched both of them, and top-notch stuff. Worth attending, obviously, just for those. I mean, the rooms were packed for the plenary talks, as they should be. So, where was I going with this? Oh, I lost my train of thought. Okay, so yes, so yeah, that was the technical part of the conference. So then the vendor areas. So the vendor stuff was great too. I spent a lot of time at the Gatan booth because I actually know a lot of those Gatan guys pretty well. But they gave a lot of great presentations and tutorials for, obviously these were product placements, right? Because they're trying to sell products. But, for actually doing microscopy work, things that I was able to take back myself and use. Okay, I remember the thing now that I kind of lost my train of thought with here, but let me finish the thing about the vendors. So yeah, so the vendor tutorials were just great as well. The whole vendor area was great too. You get to, seeing microscopes there and operational, right, is pretty cool too. So the thing that I came away with, which was really great for me, was I came away from the conference with a sense of feeling humbled, right? Like I came away from this saying with a sense of feeling, I'm very confident in my skills, ability, knowledge as an electron microscopist, but this conference has taught me, based on what I've seen, that I can still get better. I can still get better. I can still learn more. I can still develop my skills more. And so I came away from it like a little bit hungrier, just a little bit hungrier to just do a little more and get a little bit better. Not to say that I wasn't already doing that, but the conference just, it just lit a bit more of a fire under me to do that. I mean, I was already very motivated, but that just increased the motivation even more. And that's great too. Finding something that motivates you to improve, in whatever aspect of your existence you're talking about, whether it's electron microscopy, whether it's something athletics, whether it's, something else in your personal life, right? I mean, that's great if you can do that. Finding some way to, keep yourself focused and motivated. So that was that was great, right? To do that, you know, to come away humbled, and yet to come away refocused and re-energized. You know, it's kind of a bummer, right, that right after I got back, that I had my surgery just a couple days later. So, you know, it's like I came back and I was all recharged and everything, and then I had to have surgery. So anyways, that was the good, really the great, okay? But unfortunately, and this was really why I wanted to do this video, is there was some stuff that I would, you know, I don't like calling it, but it's bad, really. I mean, there's really no way to kind of dance around it. I'd say I'd call it bad, or definitely a problem that needs to be addressed, and also something that's worse than that, right? Which again, I would call ugly, okay? So, you know, we'll start with the bad and then we'll go to the ugly, okay? So the bad part of this. The bad part of this concerns the time constraints for the oral presentations, okay? So when the emails were sent out notifying people that you had been selected for an oral presentation, we were given instructions for preparing the presentations, right? So we were given the instructions, and the instructions were that if you're a contributed talk, you get 12 to 13 minutes. You have a 15-minute slot, but 12 to 13 minutes for the talk, and then 2 to 3 minutes later for the Q&A. Okay, and obviously, right, if you were invited, right, I think it was like 26 to 27 minutes. But the point is, your entire time slot wasn't for your presentation. Okay, your entire time slot wasn't for your presentation. You were supposed to take less than that to do the talk. Okay, so and the way I read this, this was the instruction. Right? The instruction was, you need to do this. This is a requirement. This is what we're expecting of you. Okay? We're expecting your presentation really to not be longer than 13 minutes if you were an invited talk, or sorry, a contributed talk. Okay? And so I made a good faith attempt to meet that requirement. Okay? And again, good faith attempt means that you're doing everything that you can to meet that requirement. Like you're making a solid effort to do that. Okay, you're not just like brushing it off or ignoring it. You're actually keeping that in mind and making an effort to do it. Okay, a good effort to do that. So the presentation I gave, I'm satisfied with it, but was it the best presentation I could have given? No. Absolutely not. Absolutely not. The presentation I gave was not the best presentation I could have given. It was the best presentation that I could have given based on the time constraints that were placed upon me. Okay? So there's a difference, right? There's a difference between what's the best presentation you can give and what's the best presentation you can give in 13 minutes, right? It would be the same thing if we made it like 5 minutes, okay? That's a constraint, right? It's like, you know, if you remember back in like high school or even college when you'd have to take like written exam and you had an hour, and it's like, well, you gotta finish the exam in an hour. What's the best you can do in an hour, right? Not a whole day, right? Not 2 weeks, right? You get an hour, okay, to do what you need to do. So anyways, I really worked hard to meet that requirement. I rehearsed the talk several times, probably 7 or 8 times. Timed myself every single time, and I had to cut a lot of material from my talk to meet the constraint. I mean, that was really the only way I could do it, right? Was I had to cut slides in order to meet the time constraint, okay? And I also, when I gave the talk, I had to go kind of quickly, right? With the way I was going through the slides. So, you know, with those two things in play, I was able to stay within reason of the time constraint. Now, there was a timer going while the presentation was happening. This was on the right, it was showing up on my screen. There was a little bit of a delay before I actually started talking because there was a little like technical difficulty. So if you were to actually like start the timer from when I started talking to when I was done, I was probably pretty close to 13 minutes. I think the actual time on my screen was close to 13 and a half. So maybe I would have been close, like when you take into account the little delay I had at the beginning, I was probably, you know, maybe like 15 seconds over 13 minutes. So was I under 13 minutes? Technically, no. I was close, okay? I think we can agree like 15 seconds past 13 minutes is very close, okay? From like a percentage standpoint, right? That's a very small percentage of a deviation from what you're supposed to be, okay? So this is where the bad part is, unfortunately. So when I was there waiting to give my talk, I was curious and I timed other people in my session. And by the way, all the talks in my session were top-notch. They were top-notch. Everything was great. Just amazing, stimulating content, material. You know, all the talks were great. They were. You know, I mean, that was the perfect place for me to be that morning, right? Regardless of the fact that I was going to give a presentation myself. Okay, so I want to make that very clear. But there were several people who gave their presentations and I timed them and they didn't meet the time restrictions at all. And I'm not talking about like they were a few seconds over. The initial invited talk at the beginning, that gentleman was 4 minutes over. So his total presentation time was 31 minutes. The actual time he spent giving the talk before they got to the Q&A. The person who was before me, which was contributed, that person took 16 minutes. Okay? 16 minutes. And you're only supposed to take 13, right? So, and this is what unfortunately bothers me, is I'm looking at this going, you know, I thought I had to meet these time constraints, right? And so, and there was an organizer there, right? Somebody was in charge, okay? At least on paper, right? There was an organizer there and he was in charge. And I remember him saying like, okay, I'm gonna raise my hand when you got like 2 minutes left or a minute left or whatever. But he let these people go, right? I mean, he didn't stop people, right? When their supposed, time allotment was up, right? Clearly, right? I mean, if a person has 30 minutes total for presentation plus Q&A and the organizer's letting him go 31 minutes for his actual talk, right? He's clearly not holding him to that constraint, okay? And the same thing regarding the person before me, who took 16 minutes for just the talk, right? I mean, I remember him giving like a warning, but he didn't stop these people and say, okay, your time's up, we got to stop, go to the Q&A, that's it, right? He didn't do that, okay? He let people take as long as they wanted to take. So the reason this bothers me though, is I'm looking at this going, well, geez, if I had known that if I wanted to, I could have taken 3 more minutes to give my talk. I could have given a better talk. I could have. Now, would it have been like a monumentally better version? No, I don't think so. But definitely definitely a noticeably better talk. Yes. I don't think there's any question that I could have done that. Or at the very least, maybe not more material, but not as rushed, right? Could explain things a little bit better. I mean, there would have been a lot of advantages for me to have 3 extra minutes for the talk. But I didn't do that, right? I mean, I went into that thinking, of course, I was under the impression that everybody else was going to do that, right? That everybody else was going to do that, and that wasn't the case. So I came away from that thinking, well, this isn't fair, right? And, yes, I'm complaining right now. I know somebody might be looking at this like, well, you're just complaining. Well, yes, yeah, I'm complaining. I'm complaining because I didn't get the same opportunity that everybody else got. I mean, it's not like because the symposium organizer didn't say to us, oh yeah, by the way, you want 3-4 extra minutes? Go right ahead. Like, he didn't do that. And the email instructions that we got didn't say that either. They didn't say that. So, that's why I'm bothered. I'm bothered because I could have given a better talk. Apparently there was, opportunity to take longer than I did. But I was under the impression that, you weren't supposed to do that, right? And yet these other people did. And, I don't like saying this, but, I mean, this is just calling it like it is, right? I told you I rehearsed my talk like 7 or 8 times. Okay, I timed myself every time to make sure I was meeting time constraints. It's difficult for me as a fellow speaker to imagine that you as a speaker, if you took 4 minutes longer than you were supposed to, it's difficult for me to see how you really made an attempt to meet the time constraints. I mean, I don't see how that's possible. Okay, same thing, right? If you're taking 16 minutes for a talk that should be 13 minutes, right? I mean, if you look at that in terms of like a relative amount, like that's not an insignificant amount, right? That's like a 25% increase in presentation time, right? I mean, that's not insignificant, certainly, okay? But, when you're getting up there and you're just like taking as long as you want, it's hard for me to look at that and think, well, yeah, these people made a good faith attempt to meet the requirements for the time that were given to them in the instructions. I can't come to that conclusion just logically. So, the only thing I can look at is say, well, they either thought that those requirements didn't apply to them, or they just didn't rehearse the talk, right? They put together the slides, and then they got there and they said, okay, I'm just going to give the talk. And it takes however long it takes. Maybe they just eyeballed it and said, okay, that looks like it's going to take about, this much time. But if it happens to go longer than that, no big deal, right? I'll just talk however long I want to talk. And they were allowed to do that, right? Nobody stopped them, of course. So, that was the bad, okay? That was the bad. Because that's just not fair, right? That's not fair that you have some people who are playing by one set of rules and another group of people who aren't. Okay, everybody who presents needs to have the same opportunity. So if you're going to allow people to exceed the presentation time, you need to make it clear, that is an opportunity available to everybody. Or you need to make it clear that, okay, you get your 13 minutes, and when your 13 minutes is up, you're done. Okay? We're cutting you off. We go straight to the Q&A, and we do that for everybody. But you can't have this in-between stuff, because it's just not fair to the people like me. I mean, I looked at that and I said, well, I remember thinking that during the session, when the session ended, that, well, I spent all this effort and time, I had to cut all this material. I ended up, I couldn't give the presentation I really wanted to because I thought I had to meet these time constraints. And it turns out I probably didn't need to do any of that. I could have taken 3 more minutes. Okay. So that was the bad. I do want to offer some solutions though. So, and I kind of just already outlined these. So the first solution is you have time constraints and you enforce them. Okay. You enforce them and you say you gather the speakers before the session starts and you say, here's the deal. Okay. I got a timer here. When you start talking, timer goes off. And when, there's 2 minutes left, I'll raise my hand up and notify you. And then when your time is up, your time is up. Okay. Presentation stops. We go to the Q&A. And if you still have material left over, sorry, you're out of luck. Okay. But, we have to be fair. We don't have an infinite amount of time here, right? I mean, you were given this opportunity, right? I mean, people in general want presentations over posters. They do, right? Because you get undivided attention from people like that. So, that needs to be a fair opportunity. Okay. So that's option 1, which is a little draconian. Okay. I will admit. Option B though, is that when you send out the notice, you have to tell people, we're giving you a 15-minute slot. We expect your presentation to be 13 minutes. But if you feel that you cannot give the best presentation you need to give within 13 minutes, we are willing to accommodate you for, a couple minutes more, right? No problem. We're not going to cut you off. We don't want you to feel rushed or hurried. We want everybody to have the opportunity to give the best presentation that everybody can give. Okay. But you have to make it clear that this is an option for everybody. Right. So everybody is aware that, okay, I can do that if I want to do that. I think what will happen though, right, is if you extend that option, everybody's going to take it. Right? Everybody's going to take it. Because there isn't a speaker out there who's going to look at that and say, oh, okay, well, I could take 13 minutes or I could take 16 minutes. Well, of course, right? Everybody's going to want to take 16 minutes. That's just a no-brainer, right? And then you're going to run into an issue now with kind of the same, right? I don't see how you're ever going to get past this. But then you're going to run into an issue now where people are like, okay, so they're telling me I have 16 minutes. So now if I want to go 2 more minutes, well, that's really not a problem. You're going to have people who, no matter what, right, they're not going to meet the time constraints. So it's like you either enforce them or you don't, right? But you can't have this situation here where some people, they do what they're supposed to and other people don't. Okay? Because it's not fair, right, to the people who do what they're supposed to. So that's the bad. And that's my solution to the bad. Okay. And then, we got to get into the ugly. Okay. So, I don't like saying that there was ugly at this conference, but there was, unfortunately. And fortunately, or unfortunately, depending on your perspective, the only time I saw the ugliness was actually in the session that I was presenting in. I didn't observe these issues any other time, but there was a gentleman during the session who was being unbelievably unprofessional. And this was one of the audience members. So, this kind of goes without saying, right? But Microscopy and Microanalysis is a professional conference. So the expectation is if you attend this conference, you're going to behave like a professional. Okay? Whether you're presenting, whether you're in the audience, whether you're a vendor, whether you're a service animal, it doesn't matter, right? You're supposed to behave in a professional manner. Okay? And if you're part of the audience, Professional behavior means you sit down, you be quiet, you don't do anything that is going to potentially distract the presenter, and you act like you're paying attention. Okay? That's what you need to do if you're going to be in the audience. Okay? And again, right, people, a lot of the time, they'll listen to a couple minutes of the talk and they'll be like, this isn't interesting. And that's fine, right? I mean, you don't have to stay there if it's because you only have so much time and there's all sorts of talks going on. So if the talk's not interesting, you can get up and leave and go somewhere else, right? No problem. Okay. Try to be discreet about it, of course. I understand, right? If you get up and move, you're going to make some noise. That's not a big deal. But what this guy was doing was it was pretty unbelievable, really, when I look back at it. Because this guy, he was sitting in the front row. So he was like right there in front of the speakers, too. Like this wasn't some guy way in the back. He was right there in the front row. And this guy kept making loud remarks and comments while people were presenting. I mean, talking, right? He was talking and he wasn't like whispering. He wasn't trying to be quiet. Like he was talking like full volume commentary while people were giving their presentations. And that's very rude to do that, right? It's very rude to be talking, period, during, someone's presentation. But to be doing it in such a brazen, blatant manner is just mind-boggling like this. And this guy did this for the whole session. He did this for the whole session. I mean, from the very beginning, from the very first talk, through my talk, he was talking the whole time. The whole time. And he was the only one, unfortunately. But in a room like that, that's all it takes is just one person to kind of spoil the atmosphere. And I remember when I wasn't presenting, I was sitting like halfway back from the front. I mean, I remember this guy was loud. Like I could hear him from halfway back in the room. This guy making noise and talking and making these comments while he wasn't like saying anything profane, but he was going like, yeah, good, right, okay, but he was being really loud. I don't know why he was doing that, but again, that's very rude and unprofessional to be talking like that and in such an obvious, conspicuous, and brazen manner, at a professional conference while people are presenting their work, okay? But the really unprofessional thing that this guy did was actually saved for me when I gave my talk. So this was I think it was only a couple minutes in. I was going through the presentation, and this guy, without any sort of warning or, request or anything, he just blurts out, like I want to know about this. He demanded that I give him clarification on something in my presentation when I was 2 minutes into the talk. And he just interrupted me like out of nowhere completely. I've been attending professional conferences for 22 years. That was the first time in my entire career going to professional conferences that I had ever seen that happen. That I had ever seen an audience member interrupt a speaker in the middle of his presentation to demand, answer to a question. And again, he didn't like raise his hand or anything. Which not that would have been any better, but he just blurted out like, what about like this? I was completely caught off guard. I was able to respond to him, but the thing that made it, even more ridiculous was if the guy would have just waited 5 seconds, I was going to answer his question anyway. Like I was getting to that. Okay. But for whatever reason, this guy thought, oh, I'm entitled to interrupt, this presenter and, ask this question right now. Okay. And I think we all know, right? The way you conduct yourself at a conference is, if you have a question, you wait until the presentation is done, and then you raise your hand, and then, if you get called on, you get to ask your question, and the presenter will respond. And if you don't, then you can talk to the presenter after the talk is done. And I mean, nobody's going to refuse to do that, right? I mean, I don't think anybody's going to, well, I'm done talking about my, well, of course not, right? I mean, when the session ended, I talked to people for like 20 minutes afterwards, including this guy, by the way. This guy, even after he had brazenly done that, still came up to me afterwards to, make more comments, and he had some other questions still. Okay? So, he still wanted attention beyond them, which is fine. Again, that's perfectly fine. It's perfectly fine to go ask the speaker about the presentation after the presentation, but you shouldn't be doing that. You shouldn't be interrupting the speaker in the middle of his talk. I mean, that's just completely outrageous. And yet he did this, right? I mean, I don't know. I didn't see this guy again. I highly doubt that, like, the audible loud remarks he was making, that he was doing that, I'm sure, for everybody, right? Wherever he went. But I don't know if I was the only one he interrupted in the middle of a talk. I mean, I hope so, right? I hope nobody else got, the same treatment that I did. But I mean, that's just terrible, though, to do that. I mean, that stuff shouldn't be happening at a professional conference. Okay? And yeah, it did affect me, right? Because, you're caught off guard. You're not expecting somebody to interrupt you. You're expecting questions and answers at the end of the talk. And you rehearsed the talk. You know what you're going to say, or at least you should. And this guy's throwing you off now here. And he's throwing off your timing and everything else. So yeah, that negatively impacted the talk. Like, it didn't completely tank the talk, of course, right? I mean, the show has to go on, right? I mean, if there's somebody like that in the audience, right? I mean, everybody who performs has probably dealt with something like that, right? Or public speaking. It's like, okay, you probably got people who are misbehaving. Show's got to go on. But it's different when the person who's doing the misbehaving is directly interfering with you, right? Like that. So, again, well, before I talk about the solutions, so there was a symposium organizer there, and he didn't do anything about any of this. I mean, I fail to see how this guy didn't notice that this other person who was acting inappropriately, right? I mean, I don't believe that he wasn't aware of this, because everybody in the room could have heard this person. But he never went to him and told him to be quiet. He never did that. And he never went to him after he interrupted me to, like, say, okay, sir, you're not supposed to do this, right? You're not supposed to interrupt the speakers while they're giving their presentations. Okay? You need to wait till the talks are over, and then you can ask. And if you don't get your question answered, you can, talk to the speaker after the session is done. Okay? So the symposium organizer just let this guy, do this with impunity. And to his credit, I know the organizer, he wasn't going into that session thinking, I'm going to have to monitor the behavior of a room full of grown adults who are supposed to be acting like professionals. I guarantee you he wasn't thinking that or having to worry about that. I'm sure, and rightfully so. He shouldn't have to worry about that, right? But unfortunately, this happened, right? Unfortunately, this happened, and it should have been dealt with, like, immediately. I mean, he should have been talked to immediately, like, during the first presentation. It's like, dude, you need to be quiet. You can't be talking like this while people are giving their presentations. I mean, if you're going to do this, you need to leave. Okay? And then, he, of course, he did the thing where he interrupted me. So, again, solution is, before the talks, right, symposium organizer gets up and he says, okay, audience members, this is a reminder that this is how you need to remember to conduct yourselves, okay? You need to be quiet. You need to not distract the speaker. You need to pay attention, right? Sit down and pay attention. And no talking during the presentations, please. And you need to hold your questions and comments for the end, okay? Once the talk is done. And if you still, if you don't get your question answered or comment heard, you can talk to the speaker later, okay? And I don't know if that would have made a difference, but at least the guy would have covered his bases, right? But then he also could have said, right, and if you can't conduct yourself in a sufficiently professional manner, I reserve the right to get you out of this room, okay? Because, the audience members shouldn't be affecting the speakers like this. I mean, this isn't a rock concert or stand-up comedy, right? This is a professional conference here, okay? I mean, that might be acceptable at something like, a stand-up comedian routine, but I mean, maybe the guy thought that that's where we were. I don't know. But, that's kind of how he was acting, would be at something like that. Like he was at a club, right? Instead of at a professional conference, okay? And then if this guy keeps doing this, right? If he goes into other symposia and does the same thing, he needs to be booted out of the conference. I know that sounds bad, but when we registered, there was, right? There was a disclaimer and it talked about behavior at the conference. It did, okay? And it talked about behaving in a manner that is professional, okay? And it talked about, right, you need to conduct yourself professionally while you are here, right? I mean, and if you're doing this, you're not being professional, okay? So, that's the ugly. I don't want to say that the bad and the ugly like ruined the experience, because it didn't. Those two things didn't ruin the experience. The overall experience was still very positive. But did it negatively impact my presentation? Yeah. And that was the main reason I went. Okay? That was the main reason I went, right? I spent weeks preparing for this. I did. When I went on the cruise, I went on a cruise earlier this summer. I spent time while I was on my cruise working on this talk. Okay? I mean, now I wasn't like neglecting my family or anything. Okay? I mean, like this was when like my wife was taking a nap, my daughter was playing on her Nintendo, and I was like, okay, well, I got a little time here, so I got stuff to do, so I'm going to start working on this talk. But I mean, I worked on this while I was off duty, because it was that important to me. Okay? So you can probably understand why, after you've put so much effort into something, when things like this happen, it makes you upset. Okay? It makes you upset because you're thinking like, I didn't get the opportunity or the environment that I should have had for giving my talk. I mean, I shouldn't have had to worry about somebody being unprofessional in the audience, and I should have been given the same opportunity for time usage that other people had. Okay? So, did that, I was still able to give an effective presentation. Was it the best presentation I could have given? No. Nope. Not at all. I did mention on the LinkedIn post, like I am going to do an upload once this is published. It is pending publication, and then once that is done, I'm going to do a director's cut version of the talk, which will be like the best version I could give. Okay. So, anyways, the last thing I want to mention is I did, when I got home from the talk, or from the conference, excuse me. When I got home from the conference, and I had been home for a couple days, I had a chance to kind of mentally process everything, okay, and realize kind of what had happened. I emailed the program chair, and I outlined these concerns, okay? Unfortunately, I never got any response. And, I imagine the program chair is a very busy person, right? We're all busy, right? I get it. We're all busy. But you know, I never got any response back, and it's been almost 3 weeks. I wrote that email before I had my surgery, right? So, I mean, it's been nearly 3 weeks. So I don't know what happened with that. I really wanted to kind of deal with this more discreetly, although it ended up kind of being a blessing in disguise, I suppose, because it gave me an excuse to deal with this in a more public manner and produce a video that I think is going to have more of an impact, right? And, you know, I know there was that email that came out recently about like the survey, you know, and I'll go ahead and fill that out, okay? I will, right? I'll take the time to fill that out, and I'll take the time to put some of these comments in there, okay? You know, but the person could have emailed and said, well, you know, hey, thanks for letting us know, right? I'm sorry this happened. You know, we're going to send out a survey. Please fill it out, right? I'll look for it. You know, I want to know more, okay? But instead, I didn't hear anything, okay? So, and it's hard for me to just kind of just sit on this without getting any response. So, you know, and again, I'm sure that wasn't intentional, right? You know, I'm sure things happen. People are busy. I mean, I didn't get any notice that like the address was invalid or anything. So I don't want to assume that this was like intentionally ignoring me or something. Okay. I'm not trying to, you know, to say that this person did something wrong. Okay. I'm just trying to say like, I made a good faith attempt to try and address this in a bit more of a private manner. Okay. That's all I'm trying to say. So anyways, that's going to conclude the video. That's take 2. I'm definitely more pleased with take 2, having been here through it, than take 1. It's definitely just, it's a notch lower in the intensity, just a little bit less edgier, and I think it still does an effective job of getting the message across, while still, you know, doing a good job of keeping my composure, right? I mean, I think that's a fair assessment. I think I kept my composure really well during this video, while still expressing that I was upset about how some of the things that happened at this conference, okay? And not to say that I wasn't in the other video, but, you know, I just feel like the delivery was just a little softer this time than it was before, okay? So I hope everything's going well for you. It's, you know, we got like about 4 months left in 2025 now. So, you know, soon we're going to be doing microscopy in 2026. And at that point, hopefully, you know, my shoulder issue will be a blip on the radar, and I'll have that in the rear view mirror. So, you know, better days are ahead. Hope your microscopy is going well for you. I look forward to doing more videos. Next video, we'll be back to the good old fashioned, you know, hard stuff, right? The technical stuff, okay? Because I got stuff in the works for that. So, but I wanted to get this off my chest. I thought a lot of people would be interested to hear about it. And, you know, I thought it would make interesting content. So I wanted to do it. And with that, peace out, my EM aficionados.